dedicate this time in the agenda for Enrique to give us our first financial update as we prepare for our budget season. This is one of the earliest updates we've provided the board, and it comes from a series of conversations that we've been having with the finance division from the state education department. When Indian Point was going through the process of closing and we were looking at the enormous financial situation we believed we were facing, one of our many advocacy initiatives was to work directly with the state education department division of budget so that we understood what, if any, increase in state aid we would receive. So over the last couple of years, Enrique and I have had many conversations with the folks up there. There was a conversation most recently a couple weeks ago where they provided us with a glimpse into what they believe to be our initial state aid run. So we're thankful for that partnership and relationship we built, and Enrique is going to give a quick update on what we've learned. And important to underscore that these are estimates, and this is really the beginning of the process. For those who have been around watching our budget process for a while, these numbers do change because they're subject to political influence and negotiations in Albany, but this is a good place to start because this is the best information we have. So with that, I'll turn it over to Enrique.
Thank you. As Joe said, as soon as we knew that Indian Point was closing, we went to Albany several times. Actually, the last time that we were there, people were starting to mask, and it was a complete mess, but all that paid dividends, because definitely I was positively surprised last week when we had our meeting with state aid, because state aid is increasing more than I thought. I was always conservative. I worked with Questar from in Albany to get an idea of how much our state aid will increase. For the first time, it increased more than we thought, not the other way around. So obviously the main reason for the increase is the increase in the wealth ratio. For building aid, the increase is going from 15.9 to 32.3. And that is a reason why we didn't want to do a long-term bond until we get the increased rate. That means that now, instead of getting 50% of every payment that we have to make for the bond that finished interest, we're going to get 32%. Sean, the person from state aid, said that next year it might jump another 10 to 15%. So, but for next year, building aid will increase to 32% and transportation aid the same. Now, we also have increasing foundation aid. Foundation aid is the main part of our state aid. There are three main reasons. The first reason is that if you remember back in 2010, during the financial crisis, the state reduced foundation aid from school districts because they didn't have the money. So finally this year they are in the second phase of restoring what they took back in 2010. So that's one of the reasons why foundation aid is going up. The second one is because of inflation. So usually foundation aid would go up between 0.5% and 1%. Now it went up the portion of the inflation by 7 to 8%, and obviously our wealth ratio. So the total amount we're going to see in the next page is around 42% increase in state aid, but we'll get there. Unfortunately, we also will be penalized because last year the elementary schools only had 179 days of school, and by law, we need to have at least 180. Next, please. So here you have the main parts of our state aid. As you can see, foundation aid is going up by about $3 million. That represents about 50% increase. High tax aid, that's because of our high taxes, so they help us a little bit with our taxes. Then UPK, it's going up from 280 to 394. So hopefully next year we won't have to, the general fund won't have to subsidize the program. Private excess and public excess is basically special ed. BOCES is a component of everything that we spend with BOCES. And then you have the per pupil state aid, hardware, library, software, textbooks, and then you have building aid and transportation aid. So here you can see that this year we're getting $9.2 million. Next year we're going to get 13.1. Next, please.
Well, we knew this.
In my projections, I was projecting up until last week about $10 million in state aid. So if this continues, if you remember, I always said that we were expecting tax levy increases of about between 4.5% and 5.5%. If this trend continues, I think that we're going to be in the 3.5% increases. We have $20 million that we've been saving for this rainy day. We have the cessation fund, and we're having an additional state aid. So for the first time in 4 years since the announcement, I feel comfortable that we're in a good financial position. Any questions?
I'll give you a Moody's A rating for that.
Thank you, but it's the whole staff, it's everyone, it's been hardworking, it's been nights of thinking, how can we do it, but we're not as good as the volleyball team, but we try.
I do have one question though.
Sure.
So on the first slide where you have the state aid update, you say increase in wealth ratio. I think it's a decrease in the wealth ratio, which leads to an increase in aid and funding. Right.
It's a decrease in the wealth ratio that increases the wealth ratio. It increases the
Wealth ratio funding, right?
Yes.
So I think that just need to add that last word,
Yes.
increase in wealth ratio funding.
It's like
Just to
I'm
make
not
sure
going to
people are
put
clear.
decrease of wealth ratio, but
Right.
yeah, but you're right.
Okay.
It's a decrease of wealth. So you know, prior to this increase, the way the state calculates the wealth ratio of a district is, if a district is 1, it's the average of all the districts of the state. If you're below 1, then you start getting a lot more because you're below the average. Obviously, districts in Westchester and Long Island are the highest. We were at 1.6, meaning we're 60% richer, wealthier, whatever you want to call it, from the average of the state of New York.
But not anymore after we lost the Indian
That's what I'm
point
saying,
funding. Now-
up until last year.
Right.
When they sent everything, they are going to show us that now instead of being at 1.6, we might be at 1.3, I don't know.
But this funding came sooner than we expected.
No,
didn't it?
3
No?
years.
Okay,
Exactly
so this is
3
the third year?
years since
been-
the
Time just
closing
flies.
of the
That's-
first
It
reactor.
feels like yesterday. Yeah, okay,
So next year, we should expect more.
that's great.
Great, first one to come.
I have a question. I have a
Wait,
couple.
hold
I
on
thought
one
it was
second,
gonna
Ally,
be else,
is it
yeah.
okay, Ally was,
Absolutely.
okay.
I just wanted someone, Joe, Margaret, to speak about the penalty, how we missed a day of school last year.
Yeah, this is interesting. We have our BOCE superintendent looking into this on behalf of a number of districts. During the pandemic, the state created basically a waiver process for all of the schools that were closed to the pandemic or because of pandemic-related issues. And the state allowed no penalty for instructional days if you met an hourly, a minimum number of hours. And it looks like what happened last year was at the elementary level that the elementary parent-teacher conferences in April is what put us below the 180-day threshold. However, over the course of the academic year, we more than exceeded the minimum number of hours of instruction. So we had been pointing to the state to say, wait a minute, under the waiver, we met the hours of instruction, and the state is saying, well, under the whatever archaic system they have, you didn't meet the 180 days. So this wasn't that all schools did not meet the 180 days. Right now we're looking at the 3 elementaries, and it looks like we've pinpointed it to the elementary parent-teacher conference from 22. So I met with our BOCE superintendent to basically say this is our situation. And he said, well, you're not the only one, and the COVID-related waivers should account for that. The problem is, Enrique accounted for this penalty because if the state were to correct this, or I'm hopeful when the state corrects this, they don't have to replenish the money as quickly as they take it away. Oftentimes it's a waiting game to get that money back. So we wanted to make sure we accounted it because that's worst case scenario. But in terms of in terms of access to instruction, our elementary kids may have only come to school 179 days, but they more than exceeded the minimal instructional hours. So that's sort of the policy debate right now that our BOCE superintendent is going to wage on our behalf.
Thank you. Can I ask a question of just about similar?
Grab your mic.
Oh, how do we get notified that that's a problem? Is that something that we have to submit a form that says we only run school?
Yeah, is it the ST3?
The way it happens, Erica, is like I mentioned a couple of board meetings ago, in August, September, we need to send absolutely everything, every number that we did, the general fund, everything to the state. The state comes back and tells you that there's problems with some of your numbers, and they tell you why. They say, there's a problem, if it's true, correct it, or if it's right, tell me why. Obviously, it speed up the fact that it was not 180 days. Carmen sent us an email to say exactly why, and the state at this point said, no, I'm not accepting.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. We're still fighting for it, but at this point, they still are saying, no, you didn't have enough number of days.
And an example of this, and thanks for reminding me, Rick, an example of this is that last year, the high school did not have 180 days because the first 2 days of school, they were closed because we had the hurricane or lightning storm or what have you. So when the state came back, they came back with a number of flags for us to consider. And we had said to the state in the first round, the school was closed, here's all the evidence that the school was closed and the reasons why, and whoever was working on the state's behalf with Carmen said, no, that's not good enough. And what I actually had in my email was a email communication I had back and forth with the Commissioner of Education at that time. We printed it out, gave it to Carmen, she sent it to the state and said, oh, okay, the commissioner knew about it. So as bureaucratic as our system is, sometimes it also relies on an email, but there is an opportunity, there's a data dump that goes to the state and then an opportunity to sort of reconcile some of these. Right now, we're trying to reconcile this $22,000, and it's not just us, because there were a lot of schools in our situation that were closed for any number of reasons or didn't have the instructional days, but more than exceeded the instructional contact hours.
Yep. So how do we compare, what are other districts seeing as far as increasing financial state aid?
Yes.
I mean, this is great, but I just want to know, are we getting everything we can?
That's why I wanted to divide this. In foundation aid, most of the districts are getting an increase because again, back in 2010, they took foundation aid from all the school districts in the state of New York, and now they are restoring it. So most of the districts are getting, and the poorer the district, the more they are getting, because they are the ones that usually get a lot more in foundation aid. Or I'll say it goes between, in foundation aid, between 10 and 40%, and we got a lot more because of the wealth ratio part of the equation.
Okay.
So, quick question, on this 180 days, how do we just make sure that this doesn't happen again? Like, can we put a math teacher on this and have them count how many days?
Oh, well, we do, well, when we approve our school calendar, we actually have the give back days. So if we use too many snow days, what vacation days we have to take back. In this case, it really was around the COVID-related waivers, because we didn't have anywhere near 180 contact days the year before, because we were open and closed and those sort of things. So our research found that had we not applied for the waiver, which we believe would have kept us fine, the alternative would have been to not have the parent-teacher conferences in April.
Okay.
So knowing that, we may need to make that call, depending on the number of snow days we have, and some of those other things. For example, I don't think I don't know if the COVID waiver is in effect this year. We don't believe so, but if we would ever get close again, that's, well, you give back days, so you pull from April vacation, which we had to do a number of years ago.
Yeah.
But right now, the April parent-teacher conference day is a day that's not accounted for, and we may have to consider that going forward, or to make that virtual or after school or what have you. But this really is a situation of the COVID waiver was about the building being open but not sacrificing instructional time. So that's our claim, and I'm sorry?
So this year, we went to half days for the parents teacher
Yeah,
conference.
okay, so there you go.
Okay.
So half
It won't be
days.
a full day, it'll be two
Okay.
half days. Yeah.
But what about Juneteenth?
Oh, that was my question.
Well, and that's another matter. So Juneteenth became a federal holiday after a lot of
Sorry,
districts.
Margaret, I'm not American. I'm sorry.
After the boards of education approved their school calendar for the following year, then Juneteenth became a federal holiday. So districts had to make adjustments there. So some of the other districts looking for the waiver are ones that recognize Juneteenth as a federal holiday and didn't make their 180 days as well. So this isn't unique to us. It's not even unique to COVID, but that was one of the big considerations. Was school districts were pushing, well, I shouldn't say pushing back, but saying we're going to need some more leniency with these mandates if you've just added another federal holiday, especially in June, to disrupt instruction for regions or end of the year. So,
But going forward, we'll stay on the conservative side,
Sure.
just to make sure we hit the minimum days.
yeah, and that's one of the reasons in our school calendar, and we're starting to build that now for the 23-24 school year. We identify for families that if we use too many snow days, where we pull in January, or where we pull in April from spring break.
So I have two things. One I have for Enrique, and I have two questions for this conversation. What is the minimum number of hours a year that we're supposed to?
990 at elementary.
And how many did we do?
We're always over for elementary. It's the secondary that comes the closest. And I think it's 9 for secondary.
And we were over 990 this year, by how much? I'm just
We'd
I
have
can
to-
give it to you tomorrow. I'll
Yeah,
have
okay.
it.
And then my other question is, why are we pinning it, if Juneteenth was the first year that we recognized it was in 2022, why are we pinning it to a conference and not accounting for Juneteenth as the failure? That sounds
Oh,
like.
I'm not accounting it to Juneteenth, I'm saying other districts
No, no.
that may not.
You
have
said it's
met.
because of a teacher. I'm not challenging you, I'm asking you.
Yeah.
You had indicated that we believe that that the issue came down to us having a teacher conference in April, but we always have a teacher conference in April, right? So it sounds like it's Juneteenth that was new in 2022, but how long did we know I feel like Juneteenth has been sort of a discussion for a while, that it was going to be a federal holiday. So it's a little weird just that we gave a snow day back in 2022 and then didn't account for Juneteenth.
I'd have to look at when that became a federal holiday and at what point our calendar was approved.
Okay, yeah,
According to the statement, one of the responses was because they've been sending to curriculum and instruction over 3 years leeway to let them know that Juneteenth for the 2022 was going to be a national holiday. So.
And then, thank you. And then my other question is, you indicated the building aid went up to 32%, and then there's talk that we may get 10 or 15% more next year. Is that 10 or 15% more as a percentage of 32%? Or does that mean we're gonna go to 45 or 50%?
What he told us is that the increased money because of the decrease of wealth ratio for next year is due to the first reduction of pilot payment. So he thinks that next year the second reduction will be applied, and therefore our ratio will go down, and therefore more money will come to us.
So like 35 to 37% next year?
I'm hoping more.
Okay,
I'm hoping about
Thank you.
40, but
yeah, thank you.
Can I just ask one question? So going forward though, the cessation fund is not indefinite, correct? So as this starts to increase and the cessation fund starts to decrease, this will make up for some of that loss on the cessation fund and keep us even? Is that the idea, or will eventually, what will happen over time?
Greg, please go to the last slide.
Yeah.
You can see in the last slide that, like I always said, we have $20 million on assigned fund balance. We have the cessation fund, and we have increased state aid. So my idea is to use fund balance more those years that we get less cessation fund to keep the tax levy increases at about the same level. And if you can see here, the tax levy increases will go up between 3.5 and close to 4%. So that's my idea.
But there will eventually be a point where the cessation fund is done and the fund balance is done.
It's your fund
Right?
balance.
It ends in 28,
I don't have
29?
my- I don't have my-
No, I understand your point.
Or in
Yeah,
28,
yes,
29.
yes.
I just want to make sure that we're accounting for that.
Here-
It is.
Yeah.
Here we're going to 2030, 2031.
Yeah.
By 2030, 2031, I'm expecting to have about $15 to $20 million in fund balance. So going after 2030, 31, we're still going to continue subsidizing the tax levy at 3.5, and about 4 or 5 years later, then we'll be able to be back, the 3.5 instead of 2% over 15 years
Yeah,
will make up that difference.
right. I mean, eventually the ride is done, right?
Exactly,
Is the
that's what
point
I'm
I'm
saying.
trying to make.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that there will be a point, because the cessation fund's not indefinite and the fund balance is not indefinite. So
Well,
this is a
fine.
good long-term funding model but there will be a point where
Corey,
that's.
No.
on this sheet, it shows the cessation fund is $0 for the 27-28 school year.
Right.
So he's accounting for the cessation fund's termination.
Yeah, which I can see that
Oh.
up there, but then the fund balance is also, our
just
fund
under
balance is gonna
18
whittle
million.
down. Yeah, it will be, but then what we're not seeing is, so when I look at the fund balance,
That's how much he's putting in from the fund balance.
right? So what
Yeah,
happens
but
after
you see the
2030?
fund balance starts going down from 6.7 to.
Right, and then we're down to 4 million.
4.5.
Right, at 30/31, but eventually that balance, maybe it's 4 years down the road, is gonna go down to zero at some point.
Well, if whomever is here back then, hopefully he doesn't bring
Well,
it
you
to
keep
zero.
saying, but there's a
but the whole
maximum
point-
we're allowed to have, we're allowed to go over that maximum now.
4%?
Is it 4%?
Yeah.
Right.
But,
Okay,
but again, that's why I don't have it here, but under my projections in 30, 31, we still are going to have about $15 to $20 million in fund balance.
okay,
What I'm assuming is that any other regular school, they are capped at 2% tax rate.
right,
We are at 1.5%, we're close to 50% higher tax levy than everyone else. Just to say 30%. So that 30% over 15 years will, in 15 years, will get the district to be at 2% like any other district.
okay.
But it takes 15 years.
That, and that's what I'm looking at, so
Yeah.
it's
I mean,
well
it's
beyond
not
this
like-
spreadsheet
It's
that,
not like in
it's
31, 32, it will jump to 10% because we need $4.5 million extra. We have.
okay, good. I'm just looking
Yeah,
far
that's not-
down the
but
road,
that's what I'm
right,
saying.
beyond
That's
this
what I'm saying.
spreadsheet.
All right, I have
Okay,
a,
Thank you.
I know we want to, and we have a lot to cover, but I'm just looking at the pre-K grants, which increased 40%. So the 280,000 we're receiving this year includes the kids we have in-house and the ones we have out, correct?
No, that's just state funding, so
Okay.
there are two funding sources. We used, sorry for that.
Not for next year. For next year, there's only one funding source.
This is state aid.
Yes, I'm just explaining to Erica what is happening this year. So this year, we have two funding streams, federal and state. We used state funding. We did leave some money on the table out of the other grant because we didn't have a place for kids to go. So we maxed the two sections that we were given, and a Rising Star was able to take 17 more.
Okay.
But we had more seats. We just didn't have the places to put them. It would appear that that will happen again.
That's why I'm asking.
Next year, yes.
Next year, can we, with more money, can we have more children in-house? Like
If you tell me yes.
No, but is that
You can have, the rules are 17 children
in a room?
with a teacher and a teaching assistant. If you go over that number, even by one, I need a second teaching assistant for that to happen. I wouldn't recommend that anyway because they're little and they need a lot of attention. So what I don't know here, and I don't know if Enrique knows the answer to this and would like to share it, is, and this is the question Joe and I have every year, is it the same funding, which means it's $5,400 per seat, and they tell you that I then have 73 seats? Or, as we've been asking them, please increase the per seat reimbursement.
So how do you reimburse them?
And we were hoping that that's what they were going to do last
We
year,
don't
but
know,
they
and
did
we don't
not.
know if they
And I
did
don't know
that.
yet if they've revealed that in the new funding, so.
No, that was one of the initiatives that NISBA took out, one of the advocacy initiatives, was two things regarding pre-K. One, more money, and two, a more relevant per pupil expenditure based on your cost of living, basically where you are. Right now, it's $5,400 a kid, doesn't matter where you are in the state.
Yeah,
So $5,400 a kid in the Adirondacks goes further. So we have to wait to see if some of that red tape has been alleviated. Otherwise, more money is great on this chart, but it may not result in more butts and seats without a district share. So
Just
that's
to
what we need to.
compare this current year that we're in to where we are right now. We were at a similar place last year, And then if you remember, we did the lottery and then we went out again because we got a second boost in the federal money. So I don't know what that will look like, but again, you know, we clearly have some decisions to make about whether or not we want to stay at 2, whether we want to increase it to 3. We always have the collaboration requirement, so we still have to put out the RFP and begin that process again. It doesn't guarantee the current collaborator that they have, you know, the rights to that opportunity. They have to begin again to respond to that.
So, oh, go ahead. Nope.
I just have a quick question. Does the 179 days impact teacher contracts since they sign a contract every September to teach 180 days? Like, does that impact them at all?
I don't believe so. I don't think we've.
No, we have to pay them as 100 on, actually, teachers have to be here 182 days.
But with the conferences?
Yeah, no, if it's our fault, why should they get paid less?
I was just making sure that they weren't going to be penalized.
Oh, so,
So my question is UPK related. We get 180 now, which comes up to 5,300 kids on, $5,300 a kid or whatever the number is, right? So what does the 280 represent? Because this says we have 280 now and it's going to 394.
That's what they gave us this year.
So it's 180 for in-house and we have 100 for,
no. The way it works is we have to.
we get 180,000 for in-house
No,
UPK, right?
I don't, is this on? I mean, it's hard to hear yourself. I don't know the exact number, Jeremy, I can find out for you, but there were 2 funding sources, state and federal. So one was, I think, 197 and change. I can get the numbers for you.
But this is
tomorrow.
only state, so federal,
Yes.
here's what I'm trying to understand, ready? We have 34 kids, right? And it's 50 in our UPK program in-house.
Right.
So I'm just trying to understand why this says 280,000 now from the state, forget the secondary funding source.
Right.
Is the other 100,000 related to the external UPK program? Because we only get, we have in-house, so I want to understand how this breaks down, because if it's going to go to 394, it's $114,000 additional expense.
Right.
Assuming it doesn't increase per seat,
Right.
that means that we just have another opportunity to pay for more kids to go out of district or to put in another classroom here, but we'd only be getting then 100,000 additional. So I'm trying to understand what 280 represents. Is it 100 to the external source and 180 internal?
It simply at this moment represents 52 seats, for argument's sake. Divide 280 by 5,400. That's how many seats I have funding for right this minute.
Okay.
How I arrive at that seating, for argument's sake, if we stayed status quo, we have 34 seats at Frank G. So I can throw 20 seats out to the community if they can pick that up.
Got it, thank you.
I think the 180 was increased last year. I think the 180 is what we originally
Right.
came out with, and it did go up. I'm not saying it's 280, but it did go up.
But and that's what allowed us to go to the external source. It still was the same $5,400 a kid.
Yes,
In
that
Frenchie,
hasn't
we never,
changed.
and
Right.
the difference was we didn't have to give the 10% back. That was the only thing different from the presentation, right?
Right. The cost per seat remains the same, and that's what we'd like to see change.
Right. Yeah, because it costs costs more than $5,400 for us to have a UPK kid in a class. We're subsidizing that in our general fund.
Any other questions for the case?
This is great news all the way around.